Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
All right, how's it going, gentlemen? Welcome to yet another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Scott McKay, and we're going to talk about something that I don't know if I usually avoid talking about this, but I've certainly moved away from talking about anything related to the pickup artist community, the seduction community, all of those sort of community-related buzzwords from about 20 years ago now, in favor of moving on to the modern way of talking about things and talking about masculinity, et cetera, et cetera. However, I do have a good friend, and his name is Clifford Lee. He comes from Montreal, Canada. He and I have known each other for so long that it was actually he who was the very first one who ever published my content. I'm not even sure if he even knows that. But insofar as my memory serves, I don't believe any other major outlet, at least, published my content before Cliff did on his absolutely legendary Cliff's List, which still exists today, of course. And he was also instrumental in introducing me to Eben Pagan, a.k.a. David D'Angelo. And that, of course, led to me being on David D'Angelo's Interviews with Dating Gurus series back in February of, you ready for this, 2007. I can't believe it has been 17 years. My goodness. Although I have a 16-year-old son who was born after that, so it must have been 17 years ago. And I'll tell you what, gentlemen, I'm really excited about this conversation today. But before we dive into it, I want to remind you that you can catch me on Twitter, on TikTok, and on YouTube at Scott McKay, and also on Instagram at Real Scott McKay. And you know what I'm trying to do for you guys? What I'm really aiming towards is putting different kinds of content on each of my different social media outlets so that you guys don't feel like you're getting some sort of repeat wherever you go. I find that to be something that annoys me when I go to other people's YouTube or their TikTok or their Instagram, and I just find the same thing rehashed over and over again. So I'm getting a little creative for you guys. Hope you guys enjoy that and appreciate it. Also, gentlemen, if you have not yet joined the Mountaintop Summit on Facebook, do that before you do anything else, because that is a growing group of really good dudes who are endeavoring to be better men and to ask great questions about getting better with women, and we contribute to each other. And there's just a real good camaraderie and a solid vibe there. So be sure to sign up for the Mountaintop Summit on Facebook. And with that, I'd like to introduce some of you guys to Clifford Lee. If you've never actually talked to him before or written any content to him or actually partaken of Cliff's List before, really you've missed out, because, oh man, above any and all others, Cliff Lee has been the number one impresario of men's dating advice, man, going back 25 years now. Cliff, man, how's it going, my friend?
I'm going well. I'm getting all red and embarrassed from such a glowing introduction here, but thanks very much for having me.
Well, man, it's all well deserved. I mean, you know, there's this art to being a connector in life. A lot of people want to hog the spotlight. A lot of people want to avoid the spotlight. And you're one of those rare, gifted individuals, Cliffy, who, you know, brings everybody together and celebrates that. And in turn, we celebrate you for bringing us all together and introducing us to each other. And I just think that's a wonderful gift. And I've always appreciated that about you.
Well, you know, it's funny because I was remembering that I did my Cliff's List newsletter for 7 years before there was any opportunity whatsoever to make any money from it, because I did it only for the fun and for personal enrichment and enjoyment. And I think that that's kind of an important thing today to mention to people, to realize that not everybody's only in this for the money. And I certainly wasn't before, although I can't say it doesn't appeal to me now. But in the past, it was like just the last thing on my mind. And I think that makes a big difference in where you're coming from.
I mean, anybody who does anything for the love of the game purely is going to be respected for that. But if you're going to go full time with it, you still got to pay the bills. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, man. So you were around long before I was. Your first Cliff's List big event was actually long enough ago that I wasn't even on the scene yet when you had everybody be a part of it. And I believe you ran 2 of them, and they're both just legendary live events in the lore of men's dating advice. And you've always threatened to do another one. And I'm still waiting, man, with bated breath, because I'm on the next plane when you do it.
Well, the thing is, when I did the first one, which was back in 2005, the community was quite different back then. People were really helping each other out and trying to get this thing off the ground in a lot of ways. And there was a camaraderie that I think is just not quite there anymore.
Yeah.
It's a little bit sad, but there's also been a lot of positive developments, I think, not just the fact that the guys are not pulling for each other as much as they did. Now everybody's more or less on their own, and, some of us help each other out, but, it's not quite the same. There was a really different vibe and atmosphere and everything going on at that time. And that sort of the golden era, I don't think it'll ever be replaced. Like it was a time when, like, for example, one of the things that we overcame, I think, in the community, and I think, all of the stuff that we've done has made a big difference, is that it used to be really taboo for a guy to want to learn about improving his success with women. It was just, that was considered very, very weird and very strange, and you were like, you're some kind of an outcast doing that type of thing. And I think that that's massively changed in the society from where it was. Like, it was just one of those things that you just don't learn. You either have it or you don't. And, you just got to man up, sort of thing. There wasn't really, any, sympathy for a guy who wasn't successful with women. And there was certainly no openness from most people to learning about it. And that just was never been my attitude, but I did notice it made a big difference for a lot of people.
That's really an astute observation, because up until probably the internet era, perhaps that had something to do with it. Self-help really was limited to shrinks, at least as far as professionals go. The idea of being a professional coach for anything other than, say, a sport was unheard of. I laugh nowadays because what I basically studied in college, Cliff, was how to be a coach someday. But that wasn't what my degree said when I graduated. But, when I was doing a combination of, psychology and education with a little bit of pre-min thrown in there, that's really what I was preparing for. But there was no such thing as a Bachelor of Arts in coaching, for God's sakes. So whenever someone needed help, it was usually seen as some sort of mental illness, wasn't it? Like you had to go to a shrink. So everybody associated with the self-help profession was helping sick people get better. The idea of being a better person. I mean, I suppose Tony Robbins was doing infomercials in the 80s and early 90s, right? And there was an outlier community of people who were interested in it. But once we got on the internet, and we realized we could get all this information, we realized that the breadth of that information could take us to new heights in terms of our ability to succeed as humans, right?
Yeah, no, I think that the self-help was seen as a different mode or a different area. I think it was the specific area of trying to get better with women that was considered not taboo, but
just
really
not macho,
awkward and weird and strange and just an unacceptable thing to be involved in.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think that there definitely was self-help. I mean, Tony Robbins is a perfect example. He's always been big as far as I can remember.
Yeah. I mean, it goes all the way back in terms of getting better with women to Eric Weber, How to Talk to Girls back in the 70s, I guess.
I remember that one. Boy, that's a long time ago. That's a long time ago.
Really the whole men trying to get better with women thing really started around 2000, didn't it? I mean, it started with internet chat rooms and news groups and so forth. I mean, that's really where you grew your sea legs as a connector, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, I think the first guy that really sort of was the pioneer was really Ross Jeffries. And,
fair enough.
He's really, like before him, I was always, looking out for these kind of, things. Like there used to be sometimes in back of men's magazines, including Playboy, there used to be, these little tiny ads about, how to, pick up women type, books that you would have to send through the regular mail. And, whenever I would see one, I would order them. And, somewhere buried in all my boxes, I do have quite a collection of these, like, all these books that are way before the community. I would search them out because I was just hungry for any information I could find about this. But stepping into the world of the community of seduction and everything was really Ross. And the story for me, how I found out about it, was kind of interesting because I remember I was in my car and I'm listening to the radio, and these people who were on some sort of a talk show were talking about how Ross had appeared on the Phil Donahue show. Probably most of the people listening to this podcast don't even know who Phil Donahue was, but he was the Oprah of his time.
Yes.
He was pretty big and
married to Marlo Thomas.
That's right. Yeah. And anyway, what happened was
girl fame.
Yeah.
Pretty hot chick. He was pretty good with the women there himself.
That's true. But basically, I was listening to them talk about how this guy was on the Phil Donahue show. And anyway, the next day I called up the radio station in New York, and they referred me over and gave me Ross's phone number. And I called him up and I ordered his book. And, it was just like, this was like gold for me. At that time I was like, I devoured that thing. I must have read it, I don't know how many times. And I flew down to LA and met with Ross and hung out with him a little bit, and got to know him a little bit. And, I guess I haven't been in touch with him lately, but we certainly know each other a long, long time. And what happened was I was in touch with him for a while back then. This is really early 90s, I think. And I met a girl and I got involved with that, and I kind of lost touch with him and everything else. And then a couple of years later, after that broke up, I was kind of looking for some more of this kind of information and things. And somehow or other, I heard his name again, and I got in touch with him. And at that time, he had advanced his stuff quite a bit, and he was throwing a Speed Life event in Maui. And I don't remember how much lead time I had before that event, but I basically flew to Maui for it. And
there are worse places you could fly for an event. Yeah.
No, it was, I've probably been to 10, 12 of Ross's seminars over the years now. I haven't been to one in a long time, but a lot of times I was trying to make every one of them. And, I met a lot of very interesting people at them. That's where I met, Evan Pagan. So many other people that I can't even begin to tell you how many that I met there that, became very good friends and, kind of lifetime contacts for me. It's because of Ross I actually have my newsletter, because what happened was he had a speed seduction email. I forget what he called it, but it was not a list, but it was the way it worked, which was kind of interesting, was that you would send an email into the number and it would bounce it out to everybody who was subscribed. So it
like a listserv.
A list service. Yeah. And what happened is that, nobody edited your post. You sent it in and then everybody got to read it right away after.
Yeah. No editing at all, which is exactly what we would expect from the likes of Ross.
Okay. Well, in any event, I kind of got slapped on the wrist because I had written some stuff up, which was some of my own ideas. And apparently, one of the rules, which I guess I didn't pay much attention to it at the time, was that, like anything not discussing speed seduction is off topic. So seduction itself was off topic. And, if I had a good little trick or technique or something or other, that's not for the list. That's something you discuss with your friends off list. Anyway, so I said, well, okay, if it's not on topic here, I'll make my own list. And I started sending out a couple of emails. I didn't think it was going to go very far, but I sent out a couple of emails with some of my own ideas, nothing to do really with speed seduction. And not to, there's probably a couple people that I knew well enough from the list that I sent it to, but I had a lot of friends and people in the sort of new community as it was forming. And I sent it out, and people started making comments, and I would put the comments in and comment on the comments, and it kind of grew out of there, and it sort of took off right away. Back then, there really was nothing else at that time. So, the speed seduction list service was the big thing. And then there was a whole bunch of other stuff that started up. Like you mentioned before, there were, just don't remember the names what you call them. Things like there was like these news groups. That's right. And things like this. And there was one that Ross had set up as kind of a distraction for everybody he didn't really want on his list. I forget what it was called also right now, but it also was kind of well known as the seduction email list.
There was alt seduction fast and things like that back then. Yeah,
that's right. And then there was fast seduction came into the picture. They were very big for a while. Yeah, it was just a ton of things were going on. It was a very, very busy time, and lots of stuff was happening at the moment.
And David D and Mystery were kind of coming on the scene around that time.
That's right.
Yeah. It's interesting to hear you recount the history of all this, because one thing that I've always sort of noted about you, Cliff, is that you're like the Switzerland of men's dating advice. You don't judge anybody for what they say, what they purport, what's worked for them. You are the king of, hey, if it's worked for somebody, it may work for someone else. Let's just go full on free speech with all of this. And I've always appreciated that about you, because I'm that way in terms of my politics. I very much agree with free speech. So although there have been people who have been published to your newsletter and indeed to your YouTube or wherever else you may proffer information to men trying to get better with women, there's been a lot of it I don't agree with, and some of it that I think is really contrary to getting better with women. But it's not my job to be judge and jury on your behalf. What you've been so wonderful at doing, and what I just genuinely appreciate, because there's such a wonderful niche in the world for a guy like you, is that you print what people send you. You report and we decide.
Well, the thing is, there's a lot to this. One of the things that I've seen, the main thing I don't support is people lying and acting out of, people should act out of integrity.
Yeah. Well, for sure. I guess there's a limit to all this, right?
And there's
just kind of like not yelling fire in a crowded movie theater. Free speech does have its limit, even with you, right?
Right. But the thing is that one thing that I've seen, which is something that I think a lot of people don't kind of appreciate and they probably look down on, but I have seen what doesn't work for one, or what people will say absolutely doesn't work. I've seen pretty much everything work for someone in some convoluted way sometimes, including things like begging, which is like nobody's going to be advocating you to go start begging. But there's a guy that I remember who he used to have success with it. He would effectively beg a woman for ages, but he would have like a whole lot of women that he was begging. And eventually they would all give in, or not all give in, but a lot of them would give in over time. And that was his success formula. I'm not saying that that's something anyone should do, but meanwhile, if you asked him, how does he get women? He would tell you probably that, he's a little bit more of a needy character, but he's been successful with it.
Well, there's a whole lot of guys out there who don't talk to any women at all. So just because of the sheer numbers game factor that he's trying to apply, he's going to get more success than the average bear, right?
Yeah. Basically, I've seen just sort of everything work that everybody else will say doesn't work. So, and I think the important thing is, and that's what I try to do by exposing all of the different options that are out there, so that you can sort of learn who do you resonate with? Like if you listen to some of my interviews, some guys you're going to like and some guys you're going to just not feel comfortable with, and very few guys, let's say, are call it perfect. There are guys that I know that, they've got a really great system, but, there were certain problems with, or challenges that they couldn't figure a way out of it other than lying. So, that was their solution for certain of the things that would come up in their dealings with women. But, 98% of what they're offering was really great. I certainly don't support the lying part, but, I can't go around and sort of help these guys find a solution so that they don't have to lie. It's just not my place. I let people do whatever they're going to do and hopefully support the stuff that I support that they are doing. And in general, I think the the idea is that this is good for everybody. This is good not just for guys. It's good for, for women are being able to connect with men, which is often a problem for women too. I mean, there's supposedly at least as big a community of women doing self-help to try and improve their own dating successes as there is with men. And actually you're probably more familiar with that than I am, but, from what I understand, the women's side is huge.
It is. It typically has different priorities. The women typically have a bunch of guys, at least in their orbit, and they're trying to find the right one and avoid the wrong ones, or trying to keep a guy they already have if he's got a wandering eye, or they're thinking he doesn't want to commit. So you get a lot of women whose big dating advice issue is, I can't get a man to commit to me. That happens a lot.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, it's the, we've sort of come at the problem from different angles, but it's still a problem.
Well, I appreciate your commitment to free speech, as I already said. Around here, I think we focus on efficiency. As these guys know, we don't focus on, these woo-woo tactics or anything that's really mystical. It's really a very pragmatic approach to what tends to work with women. And we talk a lot about masculinity and femininity and not being Mr. Nice Guy or being a jerk, but being a really good, decent man and kind of deserving what you want. If you want a great woman, be a great boyfriend. That's kind of what we talk about around here. And, you've always printed what I sent you also. However, insofar as what the topic du jour is, I think a lot of guys really are interested to hear what is still valid from that pickup artist era from 20 years ago. I mean, Cliff, as much as you and I don't want to admit it, anybody under 38 doesn't remember the game.
I mean, tell me about it. People don't remember Seinfeld. It's like,
oh, for sure, man. And there are a whole lot of dudes who have already been married and started a family by the time they're 38. So we're talking about a vast swath of single guys listening to this particular show who don't even know the heritage of where all this has come from nowadays. And that leads me to ask you, what happened to the seduction community? What happened to the pickup artist community? Where did it go? And what is it today? I have my own ideas on it, but I don't want to give them up just yet. I'd rather you give a first person perspective of what you think.
Well, let's put it this way. You gave me a whole bunch of different things that I would want to sort of express all at the same time. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to remember them all to cover them, but I guess what happened to the seduction community is, there was a lot of, accusations of misogyny and guys who were doing inappropriate things. And, a lot of stuff got out of hand. And the problem is that, the way I look at it, the term pickup artist is very, very misunderstood. It's attained a tarnished reputation, and it's now, referred to in a very negative manners and everything. But the way I interpret it, the word artist sort of says it all. An artist is someone who does something like an art. It's like a magnificent achievement. And it's not something that is bad for women. It's not something that is making men, do nasty things. These are all things that, got assigned to it or aligned to the term that are not necessarily what it should be. Because in my mind, I think, a pickup artist being an artist does something that is looked up to, that is admired, that is a positive thing. But it's just not the way it went. I mean, there were a lot of negative things that happened in the community. A lot of, there was all kinds of things like these incels who came up, many of whom were on the fringe of the community and had all these like very horrible, ideas. And, a lot of them did some pretty nasty things. And, there's been a lot of very bad things that happened around it. And that's why, people have sort of, distanced themselves from the seduction community. And, I certainly don't blame them. I think that, personally, I just keep it all in perspective and, I take the good from these things and I leave the bad. That's just my attitude of it. I don't think I'm going to ever be in control of everything, and I never intended to or wanted to. And I'm just going to, take the good like I said, take the good parts and leave the bad parts. But in terms of, you also asked about where it's sort of developed and what happened to the old stuff. I think that, in the beginning, really there was, for the most part, there was really mainly was the speed seduction, which is the use of NLP to, improve your results with women. And I think that there's still a lot of valid elements to that. And just people stopped using it. The community drifted into they call it a more natural type of behavior, a more, sort of non-technical things in a lot of ways. It was more, people were trying to do things that, were more politically correct. I think there's a lot of direction towards being a gentleman as opposed to being, this speed seduction guy who was, like Ross doesn't have the best image all of the time, come across as this, someone who has all these tricks. And, that can be seen in good and bad. And I think a lot of it has been seen as bad, but meanwhile, a lot of the stuff in speed seduction is very down to earth and very, smart and very useful even today for sure. But, I think you've seen a lot of different things. You had Mystery Method, which came along and that's also a very involved and complicated series of tactics. You had all these steps that you had to go through in order to get to the prize at the end of the exercise. So, there's all kinds of different ways that people went about creating their own methods. And I think that today, like I said, I think it's more, people are more looking for an authentic integrity, things that are more, natural. And I think that's been more the direction that I've been seeing. And it's, people trying to boost men's confidence and their, ability to, just be relaxed and comfortable with women. And honesty has also been a big thing. And honesty is a skill. You can't just sort of say what you want directly. And it's like if you went up to women and just said, I want to sleep with you, or I want to have sex with you, or you're not going to have any success, even no matter how honest that may be. It's a matter of knowing how to be honest and how to be tactful and a gentleman at the same time. But meanwhile, being completely honest about who you are, your intentions and everything else. And I think there's a lot of skill involved with that. I don't know if I'm getting way off topic here, but this is what I'm seeing out there today.
No, I think you're giving a valid interpretation for sure, even if it's just from your well-educated, well-traveled perspective of where we used to be and where we've gone from there. I, first of all, would agree with you that brutal honesty can absolutely work, but it has to kind of be in the presence of you having made a woman feel safe and comfortable with you in your presence. And in my estimation, that's best accomplished by being warm and light and injecting some humor and some fun and helping her feminine energy kind of be sparked by your presence, leading in that regard. And then you can say almost anything you want to a woman, no matter how horny or how sexual, and they'll just giggle and agree with you. So, yeah, I mean, not only is it raw skill, it's also timing and context and a modicum of patience. And I think a lot of guys lack that. I do want to go back to the early days, as you discussed. You mentioned mystery. On one of the few occasions, admittedly, I've ever spoken to Eric von Markovic, aka Mystery, I complimented him on how genius it was for him to come up with a left-brained approach to socializing with women and attracting them for guys who were left-brained to be able to grasp and start enjoying the fruits of that success. Because as you mentioned, pickup artistry is kind of, it's art, which by definition is right-brained. And a lot of times it's the engineers and the doctors and the pilots who are kind of left in the lurch, as it were, in terms of skills with women. And I really complimented Eric on really putting a whole program together that met those guys' needs. And he didn't know what I was talking about. It had never occurred to him, but that was the genius of what he did. And I was just flabbergasted by that.
You really reminded me about how, when I used to go on these, seminars from Ross, like after hours, you'd go out with the guys, like Ross would teach all day, and then you go out and practice what you learned. And, what was really pretty interesting is you meet tons of these guys who were, nice, super nice guys,
For sure.
Who could recite, 30, 40 of Ross's long patterns. They could just for hours on end with these patterns, which are infused with all of these subtle verbal tactics and techniques. And they had never said one of these to a woman.
Well, it's hard to be an artist if you're painting by numbers. That's what I've said since 2005. Let me give you a little bit of what I think. And I agree with everything you've said. And you were very charitable in terms of your description of some of the disasters that befell the pickup artist movement. I'm not going to mention any names, although I know this particular kid's name, because I just don't want to glorify people who've done horrible things. But there was an infamous moment where someone went and shot a bunch of sorority sisters in Santa Barbara, and it had PUA movement written all over it. And that was where the quote unquote underground pickup artist movement was suddenly above ground and the light of day was shown upon it. I think it was always iffy, Cliff, that, it was an underground pickup artist movement. I mean, if this was so good for women and for men and your intentions were pure, then why did you have to have some cheesy name, that you assumed online, like Fart Knocker, PUA, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's debatable. I know it was kind of like part of the whole mystique of the pickup artist movement to have a nickname like that. But certainly when these guys did demonstrably bad things, if I remember correctly, the guys who bombed the Boston Marathon also had PUA materials, seduction community materials on their hard drives, and it really got a lot of press. That's where really the music died for the underground pickup artist movement. There was a site, I know you probably remember this, that sprouted up that was full on called PUAhate.com.
Yeah, I remember that, yes.
And these guys were unloading on their teachers. I mean, they were doxing people and saying this guy doesn't really know how to pick up women. And it just became pure hate imploding upon itself towards the very people who were trying to help these guys get better with women. I personally believe those guys are still around, and you've already mentioned the word incels. I think the incels, which were always the seediest underbelly of this underground pickup artist movement, really haven't changed much. They're still there. They're still angry at women. They still claim and cling to victimhood. They don't like me very much. But insofar as guys who would have been part of the previous PUA movement, seduction community, as it was called, those guys have gravitated towards the masculinity movement, do hard things. They're certainly scattered around various dating coaches, of which there are now probably 100-fold compared to back in 2006, 2007. I mean, Cliff, I used to go to the mastermind meetings where there were 25 of us in the room, and we were the 25 guys on planet Earth who were making a solid living doing this. And everybody else was a poser. Nowadays you have probably just on YouTube alone, several hundred men's dating experts or women as dating experts, et cetera, who have 500, 600,000 followers, subscribers. So, I mean, this is a lot more diluted in terms of what it used to be, although the audience has grown. It's become more mainstream. But, all the men going their own way are kind of an offshoot of that. They've gotten really upset and really angry. And again, I think those are guys who would have, had a more negative perspective back in the year 2004, 2005. But the way I see it, back in the day, and I was there for most of it from about 2005 on, right? You had several types of people peacefully coexisting within the seduction community. You had guys who were really working on their quote unquote game, getting better with women and doing a good job and kind of high-fiving each other, reporting to each other. Then you had guys who were your keyboard jockeys. They aspired to something, but they really just didn't have the moxie to get out from behind their computers just yet and do anything. And really talked about it more than doing anything, like you just alluded to previously in your description of what went on with a lot of guys at Ross's seminars, et cetera. Then you did have this group of guys who, even though they really wanted to have a lot of sex and were very horny, really just didn't have a whole lot of love lost for women in general. They couldn't stand them, but they just wanted to find a way to have sex with them. And there's a lot of anger, and those guys tend to find their niche. And once they find guys who agree with them, they're off to the races thinking they're right and everybody else is wrong. And I'm not so convinced that those guys have evolved much since 2005. I think those are your red-pilled men going their own way type of guys nowadays.
I think we've got a little bit of a different perspective today than back when I was, in the early years of my list. And I'll throw this out at you. I think you'll find this a little bit of an interesting kind of different perspective. But when I was doing my list, I was out constantly hunting for guys who had tips, who had skills, because back then it was just so rare. Today, I mean, everybody's out there promoting themselves that they can do this and that. There's a lot of people out there that claiming that they've got, you just go on YouTube, you get tons of people, offering advice on how to succeed with women and in all sorts of different angles and different areas. But back in the old days, there really was nothing. And I was out there, when I'd hear about somebody, a lot of people, got into this stuff because I went after them. I said, I'd hear, somebody would tell me about some guy who had some ability with women, and I'd go out and I'd try and get them to be a free subscriber to my newsletter and try and get them to contribute. And I was really working on that hard back then. But one of the things that and I guess this is kind of like the twist on unfortunately went a lot more evil than I would have liked to have seen, or anyone I think would have liked to have seen it happen. But, in my mind, we're talking about seduction and picking up women, and it naturally has got to appeal to, and, you're definitely going to be finding people who are less than desirable, who would be very, into this type of thing. And at the same time, people who have, call it, these different kind of programming from kind of the average guy, people who were able to do things that the average guy, would shy away from.
They're not going to shoot anybody.
Right. It's not like that. It's just like, guys who call them psychopaths. I think there's more psychopaths more than anything else, because one of the first guy that taught me a lot about women was a psychopath, and I learned a lot from him. But he, the thing was that because of his different kind of programming, the way he was programmed as a child or whatever, he was able to do things that the rest of us wouldn't do, but we could possibly learn bits and pieces from what they were doing. Doesn't mean you want to do everything that they did, because some of it might have been going too far, but you could certainly, he was certainly in my mind a laboratory for trying things out that, maybe you wouldn't do, and maybe possibly learn something from, or learn what not to do at the same. Also, this was the way I looked at it, is that, you could learn from everybody.
In other words, a broken clock is right twice a day.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Fair enough. As you're talking, what's occurring to me is that the word seduction isn't really used much anymore.
It's true.
With men's dating advice. Yet seduction is the art of it. I always kind of think of seduction as an irresistible sales pitch to a woman's sexual side. And all of the great leading men in Hollywood are great seducers. And yet there's this negative image associated with seduction by some, yet most people who are on the more artistic spectrum of thinking about things and about men and women and the masculine feminine dance, I'm not so sure they see seduction as such a bad thing. They do see that art in there. And my absolute hardcore belief, Cliff, is that women love to be seduced when a man does it right.
Of course.
Yeah, I think we need to bring back seduction. I think seduction is that kernel of the PUA movement we need to get back to and kind of have a resurgence with.
Oh, yeah. No, I think that the thing that, it's like one of the things that Brent used to say. I'm sure you remember Brent.
Oh, I know Brent very well, for sure.
Yeah. So one of the things he used to say is, you're trying to get someone to do something that they already wanted to do from the first place.
For sure.
And
most guys are their own worst enemy.
Exactly.
Yeah. I agree with that. And, of course, Brent was my guest on this show at least twice. I think those shows have been sent into retirement by Apple Podcasts, although I'm sure you can find them on Spotify. I don't even know what he's doing nowadays. He's probably out on.
No, he's more trying to do business coaching, but I think he's got too many guys that want him for his abilities with women. Now he had a hard time, I think, in the beginning, because even though his advice was probably among the best you're going to find out there,
too unbelievable. Brett Smith. Yeah.
But the problem he had was that he was good looking, and guys wouldn't take him seriously. I
had the greatest MySpace presence of all time. I still remember that wonderful song. Under the Gun by the Supreme Beings of Leisure was the song that kind of just rolled out when you loaded his MySpace page, his MySpace account, which was all done in like brown leather background and was showing yachts in Monaco and Bugattis and cigars. And the vibe was so absolutely amazing.
Yeah. No,
that's what I remember most about Brent. Yeah.
Yeah. That's where he drifted into doing a lot of events in Monaco and high end coaching and
and why not?
I think he's probably done extremely well because he had among the best advice out there.
Yeah, and, man, let's make seduction sexy again. And you know what? That should be the title of this episode. Let's make seduction sexy back. Let's bring seduction back. Let's make seduction great again, Cliff. Even though you're Canadian.
Apologies to Justin Timberlake and Donald Trump there, I guess.
Yes, at the same time. What a great conversation, man. You and I should talk about this some more sometime because we could talk about it on and on forever. When you guys go to mountaintoppodcast.com/Cliff, you know what? Let's just send them to your webpage. Let them just absorb all the great content there. What do you say, Cliffy?
Well, right now, the website is up, but it's got some flaws in it. You're probably better off right now to go look at my YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And, on the YouTube channel, on the comments, you'll find a proper link to subscribe to the newsletter.
Nice.
I think the one that's on the website isn't working right now, but I'm going to be fixing all of this stuff, but it's just going to take a little time.
Yeah, man, let's by all means send them to your YouTube channel then. When you go to mountaintoppodcast.com/Cliff, you'll go to YouTube. And you and I did probably an hour and a half, 2 hours relatively recently on there too. It was a pretty good sesh in its own right. Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, man. Good stuff. Guys, if you had never heard of Cliff before we did this episode, boy, have you been missing out. Go to mountaintoppodcast.com/Cliff or find Cliff's list on YouTube, and you'll definitely be glad you did. All you guys who are independent thinkers and open-minded types who simply want to get better with women, you need to add Cliff's list to your list of channels you've subscribed to. Cliff, man, always a pleasure.
You're very kind for all the good words. I appreciate it very much.
Oh, man. And they're all heartfelt, man. I don't know where I'd be without you. And I think a lot of other guys could say the same thing. And a lot of other women probably thank you for the great guys in their lives.
I hope so.
Yeah, man. Hey, hope is not a strategy. I believe that to be a fact. Right on.
That's great.
Yeah, man. So, guys, if you haven't been to mountaintoppodcast.com lately, you could download a free copy of Sticking Point Solved. I have answered letters from men just like you all over the world and compiled them into that book so that, just about any sticking point you can think of has at least been addressed in some way, shape, or form in that book. Let's just leave it at that today. If you have never been to mountaintoppodcast.com, go there and download that just to have that on your hard drive, because I really firmly believe, and it's a biased opinion, of course, that it's a valuable resource to have on your hard drive. And of course, guys, I'm always more than happy and willing and able to talk to you on the phone. You can get on my calendar link and sign up for a time that's right for you. Won't cost you a dime. And as always, Jocko Willink's company, Origin in Maine, the Keyport, and the Hero Soap guys are all very generous sponsors of this show, and I do hope you'll generously support them as well. When you do, please use the coupon code MOUNTAIN10 to get an additional 10% off. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.